seconds to start speaking so people can join.
Okay, I think it
Thank
started, right?
you. Yes.
Hey everyone, welcome to session 5 of Terraforming Web3. I'm really excited about today's topic, learning from veterans, where we get to hear from someone who's actually been through the trenches of building and scaling a hugely successful app. With us today is Brian, who joined Sorare back in 2020 when it was just 5 people trying to reimagine fantasy sports. Brian was their first marketing hire, starting as a growth lead and later becoming brand marketing lead as they expanded from football into basketball and baseball. He's seen the full startup cycle and has valuable insights on growth marketing and growth tactics in Web3. So without further delay, Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Dylan. Appreciate the invitation, and I'm excited to share a bit more about Soar, what we are, what we did, where are we going, and what we're seeing in terms of Web3 gaming in the future. So I'm going to start with the slide, and I'm going to start with basically Soar. So the backstory of Soar when I first heard the pitch in 2018 was, the first pitch that actually made me understand NFTs. Back then, I didn't really understand NFTs. I thought, why would people collect cats on the blockchain? It makes no sense. Um, but then when I met Nico and he told me, listen, us as human beings, we've always loved to collect goods, and specifically, we've always loved to collect sports goods. But we've never been able to truly collect digital goods. And the technology enabling collecting digital goods and bringing scarcity online is, non-fungible tokens. But the thing is, if you only, collect goods online, there's not much that you can do. So they thought about, basically bridging a few different things together to create a new category. And those different things are NFTs, premium IP, so unique sports IP that any football fan in the world would want to collect. But both of these together would create some sort of online panini. And since these digital collectibles that we were about to create were online, you can actually do things with them rather than just collect them. And the do things with them part was obviously the gaming part and building a compelling fantasy game. And fantasy sports, for those who don't know it, is a big category. It's like a category of games played by more than 60 million people in the US. Fantasy football, as in American football, is a massive, massive category. There's fantasy baseball, fantasy NBA, but it's also obviously in Europe mostly, but also in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, fantasy soccer or fantasy football, as we call it in Europe. And so we got started building this fantasy football game, and quickly enough, 2020, 2019, with the Belgian Pro League, and then once we started signing up our first partners on the platform, then we got our first few big clubs like Juventus, Atletico Madrid, and then all the other football clubs at the time. They didn't really know what NFTs were and why they were interesting, but all they knew was that it was COVID and they were looking for new revenue sources, and we're coming up to them with a new potential revenue line. And so they were excited to partner with us, and they were hearing good feedback from the other clubs that had partnered with us. So, through this kind of flywheel, we were able to sign more clubs. And by signing more clubs, for every single new club that we launched, we, did some press releases, we did some, marketing with the club, we did some, creator deals, etc. And so that would bring a new wave of, users. And so it was really like a supply and demand game where supply was driving demand. And this is how the marketplace was, balancing. And we started with football, and we were able to dominate the football world. And after that, we saw that it was getting more and more competitive in that space. There were more new entrants, more people wanted to, build a fantasy basketball game, a baseball game, football game, etc. And so we started signing more deals to build a moat, kind of a defensive moat, and launch these new games. So we obviously launched the NBA, and we also launched the MLB. So today, Sewer is a fantasy sports platform with 3 different games, where the assets are NFT backed, collectibles. Here's a quick history of Sorare. It was launched in 2018, and 2018-19 would be the beta years. 2020 was the football expansion, and then 2021 we raised a bit of money, and so with that we were able to go a lot further in US recognition and expansion. And 2023, 2025 was really, I would say, going from more of a Web3 audience to Web2 audience, and trying to make this game as easy to understand and use for any Web2 type of user. And here's Sober in a few figures. We partnered with lots of athletes and clubs, such as Kylian Mbappe here on the left, with whom we did a brand movie. I was actually leading that brand movie, so kind of like it. I have to share it here. But yeah, we have more than 6 million. It might be 7 million today. Registered users, more than 400,000 paying users, $1.4 billion worth of cards traded, 500 million in revenue, and 700 million fundraise. And so here's the big introduction around Silver, but this leads me to my next point, which is, what are the blockers and what's working and not working in the Web3 gaming industry today? And I thought it was interesting to look at, a survey from the Blockchain Game Association, where they were surveying people, building in that space, and they saw these main drivers and challenges. Obviously, asset ownership as the top benefit. This is actually the most important benefit that we kind of push to our users, our Web2 users. That's probably the only benefit that we talk about. Is really like, on Solar, you truly own your assets. You can do whatever you want with your assets. You can, trade it on Solar, trade it elsewhere. We cannot take it away from you, etc. And I think that's the single useful and benefit that gamers on Solar understand when they don't come from the Web3 world. So 37.8% see Web2 gaming studios driving the industry forward, which I don't really agree with. 50% expect at least 20% of the gaming industry to adopt blockchain within 12 months. I think that was done about a year ago, and I don't think 20% of the gaming industry is adopting blockchain right now. And 55% see onboarding as the primary issue for the industry. That's completely true, and I think we've nailed that as Solar, and I'll go more into that. 70% battle the misconception of blockchain gaming as a scam. I think we're doing a great job here as showing that blockchain gaming is not a scam more and more. And it's taking some time, and we've seen this firsthand as a massive challenge in the football industry in Solar, where when we were launching football clubs, Web3 in 2020, 2021 with all the NFT craze, all the rug pulls, scams, etc., had a very bad, I would say, image amongst the football crowd. And I think now it's a lot better. And finally, 35% indicate user acquisition as a pressing challenge, which I think should not be the case if you're building an interesting and fun game. So, what's the simple gaming loop at Solar? It's basically the following. You come in on the platform, and you scout and collect. So you look for the best football players, you look for the best NBA players based on obviously the real live performances. And so there's kind of 2 game loops in Solar. There's the Solar game loop, but there's also the actual football game loop and an NBA game loop that really helps. And then, once you've scouted and collected your team, you can compose your lineup for a specific game, for a specific tournament. Then you enjoy the live experience of, once you've composed your team, watching the football game where your players are competing and having skin in the game and seeing the scores of your different players. improve, increase, decrease, and trying to beat the person you're playing against, or trying to, you know, rank the highest in the leaderboard. And basically, depending on how high you rank in the leaderboard, you will be able to win rewards. These rewards would be either, you know, tokens, Web3 rewards, so potentially some ETH, because we built an ETH platform, blockchain, or some you know, once in a lifetime exclusive rewards such as match tickets, signed jerseys, and, you know, meeting players like Zidane, etc. And, you know, the buying and selling is quite, you know, easy and sure. And from day one, we've always, you know, built our supply on our marketplace. And I think that was a massive driver for Solar, because we really saw, you know, we really wanted to have a unified experience. So we first started building the game and the fancy game. But that fancy game was actually built on Discord, with just like simple formulas, etc. People were playing on Discord with the cards that they had bought on the marketplace. So really, the first thing that we built on Sora was the marketplace. And so, you know, people can buy on the primary market. These cards all sell through an auction process. It's an English auction process. The highest bid wins. And, you know, the secondary marketplace where you can decide to sell your cards at a fixed price, and people can then negotiate and send offers, etc., if they want. But basically, this is how it works. And, you know, we have about, I don't know, $400 million worth of trading on the primary marketplace, and about 900 million on the secondary marketplace. The thing that we did, or that we were looking to do quite well, was abstracting ETH as much as possible. So if you look at it from this perspective, right here, you see both, you know, the price in euros and the price in ETH. And now if you go on the platform today, you'll see only the price in your favorite currency. So if you're Web2 first, you'll see it in euros, dollars, or pounds, or whatever, wherever you come from. If you're a Web3 user, you can actually see it in ETH. But basically, you can pay in both ETH or euros, or your favorite option. And most importantly, you can fund you know, your account with, you know, basically fiat, or you can fund it with ETH. And you can use any sort of payment option today. So really, from a pure onboarding perspective, we don't ask you to create a wallet. We don't ask you to connect to a blockchain. We don't ask any of that. All the marketplace is on chain. It's on StarkX, and the wallets are semi-custodial. But basically, we never make you interact with the blockchain at any moment. And to be honest, it's never been, you know, a request from our users. And we started in 2018 solely marketing to Web3 users, but we always wanted to build a game that was for everybody and that was for the masses, and we never thought of doing a game that was just only for a Web3 audience. So that's, you know, this simple payment flow. And, you know, here's the quick, I would say, history of, you know, the blockchain infrastructure of Solar. You know, we first started with Loom, which is a blockchain that kind of died now. But at the time, it was marketing itself as the, you know, Web3 gaming blockchain. Web3 wasn't really a word back then, but we started with them. Then they decided to change direction, so we had to go back to Ethereum. The problem with that is that we went back to Ethereum when we were scaling quite a bit, and at that moment in the summer of 2020, there was a thing that was called DeFi summer. So basically, Ethereum was super clogged, and we had to pay and subsidize fees because, you know, our users were not paying for fees and gas fees, so we were paying the gas fees for them. So at some point, we were paying more than like $1 million worth of gas fees per month, and we were one of the top 10 spenders on Ethereum during the summer. So quickly then we started looking for a different solution to scale. And back then we found the best solution for us, which was StarkX, you know, in Q2 2021 and in Q4 2024. I don't have the last updates, but we're doing 1.5 million trades per quarter on StarkX. You know, the main promise for me of Web3 games in the store landscape was really, let's build a game that is radically different in terms of ownership than a Web2 game. And so here on the left-hand side, you have the Web2 Jira PK foot icon. A foot icon might not be well known from all of you. Basically, EA Sports, the game studio behind FIFA, the way FIFA makes money is not by selling, the FIFA game for 60 euros, $70 every year. The way they make money is through their online mode. And on their online mode, when you start playing it, you need to buy packs of foot icons to have these players to then play. And these are, loot boxes. So people are quite excited. They buy the loot boxes with FIFA coins. They open them. They see who they just got, etc. And this is how they make a lot of money. They make, I think, more than $1.8 billion worth of revenue every year from this foot mode. And in the Sora case, we're not making this, but what's interesting in the EA Sports case is that these foot icons you buy maybe like in September or in October in a given season, and then at the end of the season in June, these icons disappear because the season ended. So this clearly shows you that you don't own your gaming items, that you're actually renting them out for a few months, and then they disappear, which is obviously a great business model when you think about it for EA, because every single year you have to buy the new game again, and then you have to buy new icons again, and very lucrative revenue. In Zoro's case, we have this PK card, and this PK card, once you've bought it once, let's say in 21-22 season, you can use it as long as he's still playing as a football player. Once he stops playing as a football player, you'll still own the card, right? But the card as a gaming item won't exist anymore because he's not going to be producing any kind of fancy points because he's not playing on the field. But what's exciting about this card compared to an EA card is that obviously you can trade it on Zora, but you can trade it on any marketplace that supports the Ethereum standard, OpenSea, etc., etc. So you can kind of do some arbitrage, some liquidity arbitrage, which you can do with FIFA because you just have to trade it on FIFA's marketplace, and most importantly, I think that for me was the biggest promise of Web3 gaming, and still is the idea of interoperability. What I mean by interoperability in this case is basically the idea that someone else could build a game on top of Sora cards, and offer a different experience than the traditional Sora fantasy football experience. So I'll take that example. We have 7,000 football players for whom we create cards, and maybe 10,000 now for whom we create cards every year. And out of these 10,000 football players in the football population, there's probably like 500 that will retire every season. And since we've had, 6 seasons on Soar so far, there's probably like 3,000 players that have retired for whom we have printed cards. And so technically these cards are now only collectibles on the platform. And you could come in as a game studio, game developer and say, it could be interesting to actually build a game for this, card population, player population, because there's a strong number of users, collectors who own these cards who don't know what to do with them and who would like to use them. So I could, for instance, build a Nurstone-like, football game, only with Sora retired players, where, you could sell some boost for for a bit of money, etc., and try and reach the 400,000 population of Sora players, and try and kickstart a game like that could quickly go to 40, 50,000 weekly active users. And for me, the fact that with one gaming item you can have multiple layers of utility, that would be obviously collecting utility, gaming utility, but multiple layers of gaming utility is the ultimate promise of Web3 gaming. The fact that if you collect a costume in Fortnite, you can reuse it in another game. But to be honest, so this is kind of what I'm talking about. Today there's about $100 billion worth of virtual goods consumed in games, but these are consumed in closed games. You can't really use them anywhere else. But if you had an ecosystem where instead of, trying to have people spend as much time in a specific environment, gaming environment, you would try and build as many possible experiences on top of the assets. Then it becomes quite interesting because the asset is the platform rather than the environment. And the environment is actually all the games around this specific asset. So the asset, the gaming asset, kind of becomes like an operating system that opens up the world for you. And so this has always been I would say, ultimate vision of Solar is that, we started as a fantasy football game, we add on more games, and a step three would be we're the platform for sport games because these assets, these NFTs, allow you to have multiple experiences, experiences, but it could even be more than just gaming experiences. It could be ticketing experiences, it could be clubs experiences, VIP experiences, etc. But that's not been the case. And the reason why it's not been the case is actually, let me, for instance, give you an example. It hasn't been the case yet because if I take this example, so this is how you can simply mint and withdraw to Ethereum your NFT. You can see token ID, the IPFS data. And you can mint it and withdraw to Ethereum. Why? Because it's minted on StarkX and it's not minted on Ethereum directly. And out of the 400,000 users that we have on the platform, there's only maybe 0.5% of people that have actually minted a card and withdrawn it to Ethereum and tried to do something with it. Despite still having maybe 20 to 30% of our player population as in user population that comes from Web3. So even Web3 users are not really engaging in Web3, I would say, experiences or attitudes with these cards. And we haven't seen a strong case for it just yet. What we have seen is game creators building other games around Solar, and that's been quite exciting, but we haven't seen users really pushing for new boundaries. And so, it begs the question for me at least is like, what is Web3 gaming? What does it look like from a success perspective, and what needs to be done? And to be honest, from our perspective, Source perspective, what we've always done is try and brand Sora as a Web2 game. Most of my Web3 friends call it a Web 2.5 type of game. And that's perfectly fine because this is where we got our growth from, just really having a Web 2 perspective. So yeah, I just wanted to, finish on this. We've yet to see the full promise of Web3 gaming. From Source perspective, we haven't cracked the code. We're still trying to do it. But actually, what we're really trying to do right now is scale the game as a Web2 game, with an app first perspective. We've been pushing the mobile app a lot, and we're just trying to onboard as many football and sports fans as possible to the platform. And we'll be building more Web3 use cases when we feel like they will drive a lot more value. And right now, we're very happy to have, the one true Web3 promise that users feel is beneficial to them, which is owning your asset. But even from that perspective, we've slightly changed how we saw owning your asset and what it means. You can own the asset, but the asset year after year have the same properties than the newest asset? Not necessarily anymore. Like the newest cards have more power, have, I would say, more influence in the game than the oldest cards, which was in the case at the beginning. And that's it for my presentation. And yeah, I know Dylan, you wanted to do a little fireside chat, so and then a Q&A, so happy to engage in that now.
Awesome. Brian, that was fantastic. You've given us a ton to think about, and I love your slides. They're just extremely pretty, in addition to just very informative as well. So I'd love to dig a little deeper and get into some of the nitty-gritty of your experience as well. You went from being the new marketing guy at a 5-person startup to helping build something huge that really changed up how people are thinking about fantasy sports. So sure, there's a lot of great lessons in there for everyone building in the space. So we'd love to just dive a little deeper into it. So my first question, as Sorare's first marketing and growth hire in a team of 5, what were your initial growth priorities and how did you actually determine where to focus? when you had limited resources, especially on day one versus the year one?
Yeah. As the first marketing hire, I was lucky to join at a moment where there were early signs of traction. And so to some extent, product market fit, I wouldn't say it was there, but we saw that there was an interest and there was, the people were starting to collect, starting to buy. So there was something there. And so for me, the question became, there's organic traction, organic growth, and what do we do to try and make it a lot more than just organic and build, product-led growth, flywheels. And I started experimenting, testing different things, looking at different channels. And my first few ideas were, there seems to be a lot of people that are, a few people, a really strong community of, early adopters that are massive fans of the product. Like, how do we incentivize these people to refer the product? Like, what's important to them? Are they ready to try and bring in people? What do they need as a carrot to bring in people? So I started trying to test a referral program that was all, handmade with, type forms and things like that. So like so that the product team wouldn't need to do anything for me. And once I build the confidence that, okay, this is working even with a very clunky system, people are referring, people are trying to invite new people, we should build this as a feature in the product. We did this, and the referral program was hugely successful. 50% of our new customers came from our referral program. So it was so successful that we kind of had, lots of, some fraud issues, etc. But that was our, marketing engine number one. A bit like, an Airbnb or an Uber, etc. Then I tried different things, and where we were very lucky is that we were, the marketplace to some extent was supply constrained because we had only a certain number of football clubs at a time, and we were onboarding new football clubs. And for every single new football club that we were onboarding, we were trying different things. We had a little playbook to launch a new football club, and we were working with the football club to have marketing from them, right? But to be honest, like football club marketing, if you are Juventus in 2020 and you post about Sorare, most people wouldn't understand what we were about. Most people didn't know what Web3 gaming was or were not interested in Web3. But what I started doing is, I remember, I joined in January 2020, and in February 2020, we announced Juventus, which was the biggest club to date. Joining the platform, it was probably like the 25th club or something like that. And we had a really, really small, tiny contract with them, a licensing contract. But I started writing a press release, which I hadn't gotten confirmation from Juventus for. But in that press release, it was like, Cristiano Ronaldo is officially on the blockchain with his first ever NFT, which was definitely not true. But he was a player there, and we minted a Cristiano Ronaldo card. So that was my hook. And I sent that press release to CoinDesk, Cointelegraph, etc. And those were the first few, big, Web3 publications that the first time we hit the press with them. And so through this, I was able to build relationships with, all the outlets there, all the journalists there. And for every single new club that we would launch, I would push every time, even if it was a small club, like it would be like, oh, Porto's launching next. I would still push CoinDesk to Cointelegraph. Then it might not have had like, the same success, but then I would push the local Web3 creator, in Portugal or press outlet in Portugal, etc. And since we had all these little events, that kind of partnership led growth wheel worked out well. And then finally, affiliates and creators was a massive driver for us.
Nice. So doubling down on this concept of organic growth versus product-led growth. And I also will have several questions on just the flywheel that you mentioned in your presentation too. But getting back to just organic growth versus product-led growth, how do you actually balance between driving the campaigns yourself versus letting the community and the teams actually take the wheel so that you can get more scalable growth without just to get a little bit more scalable growth on the product side?
Yeah, I mean, if I could choose, I would only choose for product-led growth
Yeah,
because like it's technically
it's a lot
free.
easier.
Yeah, exactly. So and we were very lucky that, at the end of the day, the first product-led growth wheel was the product itself, right? People were very happy with the product because the product was um simply like, come in, collect, play. If you're good and you understand it, you can earn rewards. If you're earning rewards, cards, etc., you're happy and you want to invite friends because you've just like won something. You realize it could be interesting as an investment, it can be interesting as a game and fun as a game. And so, you're bringing in people. And obviously, if you were not tempted by bringing in people, but now you see a referral program that tells you, hey, if you invite someone who buys 5 cards, well, then you'll get 1 card for free for inviting him, and you don't know what that card is, so there's a bit of a loot box thing in it. Well, then you would invite people. So the referral program was just here to kind of supercharge the actual like normal product flywheel. But then it was all the little other things in the products, such as like, what's the sharing experience? Like, what's the reward experience? Like, how can you share it? How can you make this a magical moment? That were important. And finally, at the end of the day, if it's only product-led growth, you don't decide what image you want to build around your company and around your products. And this is where, product market, like as in brand marketing, becomes quite important. And to some extent, that's what happened to us is that, we were five in 2020, and in 2021, during our Series B, we raised a lot of money. We were still like 15 in the company, or 17, or between 15 and 17 or something like that. And, we had so much to announce in the middle. Like we had, multiple fundraisers, we had um, multiple new leagues joining, etc., with whom we were doing co-marketing. And so we didn't really have a lot of time to think through like, okay, like what's the brand? What are the brand values? Where do we want to go? What do we want to show? And so if you don't do this groundwork early enough, and you start having a lot of growth, well then, it's your community who will define who you are, because like, as someone who doesn't know you, typing your name on Google, they'll see what the community is saying first before what you saying first. So that was the learning, and that's what we tried to change a bit, because certain things the community were saying were good, but other things were not so good. And you didn't want to have, I don't know, potential new partners, regulators, clients see what they were saying.
Cool. You were mentioning a little bit about this partnership flywheel effect, so maybe we can just kind of go into that a little bit. Basically, you were saying that clubs heard this positive feedback from other clubs and other peers that they had, and this worked extremely well for new partnerships. What point in your journey did you start noticing that this was happening? And then was there just an immediate clear path to capitalize on this social proof? Or was it something that you needed to work through to make sure that it worked out properly and you got access to the right people?
Um, yeah, I think the hardest part is always going from 0 to 1, right? And for the story, like, our first partner was the Belgian Pro League, and the only reason why we got them as a league deal back then was because the CEO, Nicholas, he got a meeting with the chief business officer of the Pro League, this like 10 people team, and he was living in Paris, but he actually took the train from Paris to Brussels to go to the meeting, and the guy was not expecting it, and he was like, "Okay, you seem to have a lot of grit. You seem to really want it. I don't know anything about what you want to do. I don't really understand what all this is about, but I'm willing to give you the license for X amount, and that's it." And so they took a chance on him to some extent, and he was that kind of helped him start and have this little partner. And then I would say that was not enough to get that flywheel going, but after meeting exactly the right people to help him on the partnership side of things, that knew the football licensing world, that had the right connections, and the right introductions, he was slowly able to sign. And that's when the flywheel started kicking in, right? Something as stupid as we signed Juventus the first team, the first really big team joining. And we were able to hit the press with them. We were able to hit the press in Italy, hit the press globally through Web3 outlets, etc. Then suddenly we even started having football clubs coming up to us saying, hey, like, cool model, we're looking for new revenue streams, we could work together, right? And so beggars ain't choosers. We were not really choosing back then. We were not saying, hey, like, we're not going to take you because we want a league deal, because at the end of the day, like, having a league deal is a lot better than having a club deal, because you'd rather have one league with like 20 clubs rather than 20 different separate partnership deals. But that's how it went. And so every single new club was a big win for us. And since we had done that, 50 times in a space of a year, we then had the simple flywheel that was really well oiled of like launching these new cards, these new clubs, having these new players, having this new audience that was interested. But yeah, having the right people with the right expertise in this field was super important. And if you hadn't met, the licensing, consultants that he was working with, we would have never been that fast. That we probably would have lost the race to some extent to other potential competitors that we had back then. Because the idea that we had there were other people that had similar ideas than ours, but I think his execution was the best, and that's why we won.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of people have the same ideas for a lot of problems. It's just who is the person that's going to put themselves out there, do the work, and execute the best. So I like that you brought that up because it is such an important thing for not just the gaming side, but not even just a startup side, just life in general.
Yeah.
So, you know what I think probably the coolest thing about Sorare is people knew about it outside of crypto. People talked about it, people played it, and they didn't even know it was a Web 2.5 or a Web 3 type of company. So what I think is really cool is you're able to actually attract real sports fans by not emphasizing blockchain aspects. You get a very different type of person if you were just emphasizing NFTs, for example. So what kind of messaging actually resonated with these fans? And how did you decide when to highlight or downplay the Web3 elements?
Sorry, so what was the first question? I got the last one, but not the first
Oh
one.
yeah, no, it's the same question. I was just setting
Okay.
the stage a little bit.
Okay.
But
When
yeah,
to
just
so
really,
when to downplay and when to
yeah,
um
and what messaging like really resonated with the traditional sports fans?
yeah, so there's when we started and where we ended, we were targeting different people. And I think that's true for all startups. Is when we started the first month the company started, when it was just a Discord and an idea and a few people, like a waiting list on the website. There was only one other Web3 sports game back then. Is a Web3 sports game called MLB Champions. It was kind of a Web3. It was kind of like MLB fantasy Web3 game. And they had, got a license from, MLB, which is a big deal, to be honest. But the team, kind of fucked it up, and the community was slightly, leaving the game. And so we came in late night to 2018, early 2019, bringing in this hardcore community of believers in a sports fantasy Web3 game to the sort of Discord. And we had within these guys, like, just MLB fans who didn't know anything about football, who didn't know anything about the Belgian Pro League, but still really liked the idea and thought that this idea had legs, and started collecting football cards, even though they were not football fans. So, initially we only had the hardcore Web3 fantasy gamers. Then I would say that we were targeting the Web3 sports fans in general, and even that community is still massive. You love Web3, you're a sport fan. There's so many people out there that are Web3 and sports fans. And finally, once we thought, okay, it's hard to, reaching all these guys is expensive because Web3 is becoming quite expensive, and that was more like in 2020, 2021, I would say 2021. And we realized that, hey, listen, our products, is getting better and better in terms of abstracting from the Web3 tools and Linguo, etc. Like, let's start going after the super intense like football gamers, which was a bigger audience to some extent than the Web3 sports fans. And so super intense football gamers were people playing Football Manager, people playing, FIFA, people playing all sorts of football games. And then, doing that for NBA and doing that for MLB. But so our messaging evolved depending on who we were targeting at every time and at each stage. And today I would say, obviously, if I'm the CEO of Zoer, Nicola, if I'm going on a Web3 podcast, or if I'm going on a sports business podcast, or if I'm going on a culture, whatever branding thing, I wouldn't have the same language. But at the end of the day, it's the same product. So I know what would be the right hooks and the right interest for all these different audiences.
Objectively, you're building an app that's supposed to be fun. That's kind of,
Exactly.
and I
Exactly.
feel that's the same with a lot of games. It's supposed to be fun, and that's the core proposition. That you
Exactly.
is, yeah.
And there's been a massive difference between, I would say 1920, and now is that, initially a lot of people, if you target only Web3 users, they all come in with the idea of, oh, a game where I can maybe make money, right? In different sorts of way, like, through potential token launch or through, asset appreciation, etc. And that was certainly true in 2019, 2020, etc. And for sure that was also certainly true because assets would appreciate, like, like price cards would increase, like card prices would increase, etc. Uh, and what was I going to say? Whereas I think in 2024, 2020, no, 23, 24, 25, different things happened in the Web3 gaming space where most, you know, Web3 games had asset prices that would decrease. And so people that were there for the money wouldn't stay anyway. And people that came in saw that, okay, asset prices are not increasing. So like, why would I play for the money? If I'm staying here, it's actually playing because it's fun and I like it. And if I had to survey the server population between 2018 and 2025, large majority of people playing server playing it purely for fun. Was like in 2019 it was, I wouldn't say that it was a large majority basically.
Stay on this topic of messaging and community. So something that I've always been kind of curious about. You started in football and then you went to basketball and baseball, correct? What did you actually learn from adopting your playbook on the football side across these two different sports, three different sports, and specifically how you adopted your playbook across the different communities that focused and were big fans of baseball but didn't care about football? Were there kind of major differences between how you approach these different fans, and what resonated with each different type of audience?
Yeah, major differences. Football, I mean, first of all, product differences. Like you cannot build the same product. It's a different sport, different scoring system, different, schedule, agenda, so many differences. And the most obvious one actually is different player population. What I mean by that is if you look at MLB or specific, even more so NBA, the player population in the NBA is like, 24 teams, or I don't know, maybe a bit more than that actually. And 15 players per franchise, 20 players per franchise. But at the end of the day, it's like a pool of 300 players, or 500 players. Whereas in football, we had a pool of like 10,000 players, right? And so the first question is like, hey, if you have the same demand, but you have a shorter amount of supply, like it's not going to match up, like it's going to be complicated. So like, how do we change the supply? How do we change the scarcity for NBA compared to football? Do we do things differently? Yes or no, etc. So how, why, etc. So we had all these things that we had to think about, and then finally, from a marketing perspective, obviously, if you for us, the big challenge was like we are onboarding US sports, and we're a football game, and or a soccer game in this case.
Soccer, yes.
So
Yeah.
And so we need to attract, American interest, because if you, specifically in the case of MLB, like, outside of the US, there's only one of the market that is interested in the MLB to some extent is Japan. And so how do we attract these fans, this audience? MLB is quite different in terms of audience than the NBA. Like MLB is a lot, to some extent, a bit older, maybe not as urban as the NBA fans, etc. So yeah, we had to think through, where's that audience? What's the messaging that would resonate? How do we market, with channels, etc. And how do we make this product as American as possible, basically? So quite a challenge, but also quite a challenge even before the marketing aspects of it is, I would say, the people aspect of recruiting the right people that know the market, and building a team that is across two continents was definitely a big challenge too.
And potentially even changing up your website to change it from football to soccer in the US.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean,
for
I
sure,
would
for
be confused.
sure,
I'm American. Um,
for sure.
cool. So I think we have one more question before we'll open it up to the audience for a couple. But we'll end on a high note. For founders shipping their MVP, whether it's a game or a social or an entertainment app, what's one growth tactic that you would prioritize for the founders in their first 90 days that they should be really implementing?
Um, I don't think there's any growth tactic, and you might have heard that from other people. Like it's kind of a shit answer, but I think the most
No, it's the
important,
correct answer.
but I think the most important is trying to build an early community of true fans of what you're doing. And that's the honest answer. And so the best way to do that is, okay, like you are building, um, a strategy game around chess, for instance, like, where are the people that are so obsessed with chess and are like Web3 fans and chess and Web3 fans and are, willing to spend time on a new project, help a new guy or a new founding team, and willing to spend time on the Discord. Where is that community of hardcore Web3 chess fans? And, how can I piggyback on that community to try and attract them to my community so that they hang out in my little, founder Discord, like that you just founded? And how can I get the first 100 true fans that believe in what I'm building, that will spread the word, that will give me feedback, that I can do user interviews with, etc. And so for me, the most important is that is like driving those 100 true fans. And there's no one single tactic that will do that. I think the best way to do that is um, hustle and go and post and share what you're doing with the most relevant communities, and do, both highly targeted but also volume of posting across communities to get that 100 fans in your Discord, trying, testing, providing feedback, and potentially tomorrow becoming advocates of what you're building. Because once you have 100 true fans, you can start using product-led growth techniques to try and multiply this number.
Nice. Well, Brian, this has been incredibly insightful. So thank you so much. I could honestly talk to you and pick your brain for hours, but I'm sure that our community wants to get a chance to ask some questions too. So if you have a question for Brian about anything we've discussed, whether it's growth tactics, community building, partnerships, now's your chance. Just type your question in the chat below. I do have a couple here already, so I guess we can just start with this one from Luis. How has your strategy for IP partnerships evolved from your startup phase to recent expansions? At the beginning, how did you determine when you were ready to go to market? Was it based on the number of IPs secured, the number of customers, or other factors?
Yeah, IP has changed quite a lot. The biggest, I'd say, changes were external factors, right? So if you think if you thought about sports IP in the Web3 world in 2015 or 16, 17, it didn't exist. Like there was no such thing as sport licensing for Web3 products. So we were quite lucky in a sense that we were amongst the first to come to football clubs and say, hey guys, like we're building this thing, and this thing is a Web3 fantasy game, etc. And we would like to license your IP. That proposal, like no one had had, those kinds of discussions before. The thing is, they already were licensing to other companies, and in our case, it was they were licensing to the closest thing they could think of was like Panini cards or Topps cards. Like they were like collectibles. So you guys are collectibles, but you're digital collectibles, and so they're thinking, okay, we need to carve out a contract that doesn't impede on the exclusivity we gave to Panini or Topps, right? And so that was what was quite interesting is that we were able to build from an IP perspective a category that was not even in the clause that they had with Panini or Topps because it didn't exist, right? And so that we were because of that, the strategy was like, okay, like our category where we going to be asking for exclusivity is not just collectibles or not obviously not collectibles because they had an exclusive contract with Panini, not digital collectibles because sometimes even though that wasn't in the contract with Panini or Topps, the football clubs were scared that Panini or Topps would come back to them saying, hey guys, like it was kind of implicit that digital collectibles were not possible. But we carved out an exclusivity which was around Web3 fantasy game, basically like digital collectibles fantasy game, like something like that. And so with that in mind, like this was the category that we were creating. We wanted exclusivity around this category, and we were getting it for very, very, very cheap because no one else was there. What then happened is, that was 2018, 2019, 2020 to some extent, but in 2021, the market really started heating up a lot. NBA Top Shot had raised a lot of money with their NBA game. You had other players seeing like what we were doing and the money that we were driving, and so we had competitors, startups, bigger corporate groups, other big startups, etc. And so someone like the Premier League, which is probably the best example, like biggest IP in the football world, um, they had they had a lot of offers, right? Probably, and at the time, if you were a football club, at some point you were getting 3 emails per day from different Web3 projects, right? So obviously, within all these emails, you would get maybe like 5, or it'd be real projects with real funding and interest, etc., etc. But that's what was happening. So the strategy had to change, and we had to be a lot more aggressive. And now it's quite different again, because if you look at the space has dried out. And so, what back then, if you're a football club in 2021, 2022, or like the NBA or MLB, for that matter, you had a lot of people coming at you for this license, and now you've got nearly no one, no more. And so at the end of the day, IP is always a question of like how hot is the market, and how established are you in the market? And finally, I would say that once you have the IP, the what will draw partnerships is your relationships with these partners, right? And so it's a lot easier to renew the partnership or change the partnership, once you have your foot in the door than like not having the foot in the door. So we were very aggressive in 2021, 2022, but now we have the whole IP that we want. The only big main sport that we're missing, I would say, would be American football. But at this stage, we need to focus on these 3 games that we have and scale these rather than like including new games. So we're very happy with these 3 games already.
You already have the real football anyway.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm European, so I agree.
I'm American and I agree too.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I think that's a wrap, Brian. I really can't thank you enough for being so open and generous with your time and your insights today. Any last words? Can you share where listeners can follow your work?
Yeah, I mean, hope you all liked it. If you guys have any questions following the session, feel free to just like, ping me on Twitter. I'm at Baru Hagen, and yeah, good luck with all your work, and see you guys soon.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank
And
you, Dylan.
before everyone heads off, just a few quick notes. If you're looking to level up your StarkNet skills, definitely check out our Cairo Basecamp. It's the fastest way to get comfortable with the stack and start building, and it starts tomorrow. And for those of you who are working on startup ideas, we have a Founders Basecamp, which is running right now. Session 1 on idea validation was yesterday, and next Tuesday at 4 p.m. UK, we're going to be covering go-to-market strategies and marketing. It's perfect if you're trying to refine your concept or get ready to pitch to investors. And don't forget that our final Terraform session is next week. We're diving into Web3 gaming and AI agents. What are they? Why everyone's suddenly talking about them, and why they're a perfect fit for fully on-chain games. So Brian, thank you so much. Everyone, thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next one.